It's Mac and Perry in the place. Da-na-na-na. Mac and Perry.
Go live to create.
Da-na-na-na. Mac and Perry invite you to stay.
Hello and welcome once again to the Windy City's finest, on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Perry, he's Mac, and this is
Jen.
awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us, Jen. And yeah, I'm super excited to dive into some icebreaker games with you, get to know you a little bit. And the first thing we usually do is our little trivia questions, Medicine Hat specific, of course. And so yeah, I'll just jump right in. So my first question for you is, Medicine Hat is located along which river? A, Milk River, B, the South Saskatchewan River, C, the Old Man River, or D, the Bow River?
South Saskatchewan River.
Yes, you got it. Nice. And I'm just going to make sure I got the right next one. Awesome. Great. Our next question for you is, Medicine Hat is a hallway between A, Lethbridge and Moose Jaw, B, Vancouver and Winnipeg, C, Edmonton and Bozeman, or D, Alaska and South Carolina?
Maybe all of the above.
Potentially all of the above.
Really?
The one that we have down is B, Vancouver and Winnipeg.
Okay, yeah,
But
that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. Awesome. I will pick our next one here. Whoop-a-woo. Lake or ocean?
I love the ocean.
Can you tell me more about that? Have you had experiences by the ocean, or?
Well, I had never been to the ocean until we went to, well, we made a big trip at, Disneyland and everything like that. And
Yeah.
we went to the ocean the very first time with our own kids.
Right.
So it was just amazing how big it is, how salty it is,
Yeah.
how it pulls you when you're standing in it. Yeah, and the ripples and the waves. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would also have to say ocean. And it's interesting because we're, landlocked in Alberta. And so, no, that's really awesome that you got to take your kids there. And I mean, I'm from the UK, so surrounded by ocean, And so I guess part of me maybe misses it a little bit. But yeah, there's something about its vastness and power. And yeah, it's very humbling, I find. Yeah.
You feel very small.
Yeah, awesome. I'll pick one more, and then I think we can move on to our main attraction. What do we have here? Swim or suntan? So if we were at the ocean, what would be your preference? Go for a swim or suntan or both?
Me?
Yeah.
I thought you're first.
Oh, I can go first. Yeah. Swim or suntan? I'm not a strong swimmer, but I do enjoy swimming. So I'd probably say swim. That would be my preference.
I'm a non-swimmer,
Yeah.
so it would be the suntan, but I'm not a big suntanner either.
Oh, okay.
I do like the sun, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, but I'm not one to lay in the sand.
There, yeah. No, that's totally fair. Awesome. Okay, we can move steadily along here. I'm just going to pull up my questions for the Tumbling Towers segment. So, yeah, we'll go one at a time. We'll try and get out a block, or you could even call out a number that you see on a tile, and we can just ask the question. Do you want to go first or me?
I'll go because
Okay, awesome.
I think I see one. I have to be steady.
Yeah.
I can't grab it.
Ooh. Oh, nice. And what number? 4? What do we got here? If you could choose to have any superpower, which would you choose?
What superpower would I have to choose? The superpower to bring peace in the world.
Nice.
It's so hard to see all the suffering that goes on and all the pollution that's happening. Guys, what are we doing to our world?
Yeah. If I were to have any superpower, it would be to be able to warm up things or cool things down with my hands at a touch. So it's like you have a cup of coffee and it goes cold, and then you just be able to heat it back up. No big deal. And yeah, I don't know. I just think that would be an interesting practical superpower. So
Very practical.
yeah. Anyways, we'll move on.
Your turn.
There we go.
Oh yeah, that one was easy.
Ooh, question 1. Aw, what brings you joy?
I don't know. I think the biggest joy is seeing the innocence of a baby, being able to make it laugh just at will.
Yeah, that's so sweet. Yeah. And you have your own kids, so that's obviously something that you have experience with.
And grandkids.
And grandkids, nice. Is there a difference there, or is it the same? And it's just beautiful.
Oh, it's nice because when you have the grandchildren, you don't have any responsibility.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. I'm going to see if I can get one. There we
Oh,
go.
look at how easy that is.
Wow. And that is 7?
Yeah.
Awesome. What are you reading right now, if anything?
Well, I just finished it, and it's called Heart of the Horse. And having done the interviews and having talked to, people, barrel racers, they talk about how their horse can not only just feel their emotions, they can feel their almost feel their thoughts, and it certainly seems as though they can hear that they understand their voice.
Right.
But more than that, almost like they feel their thoughts, like it's almost like another sense that is beyond what us humans can comprehend. And when I read that book, she talks about that over and over, about the various horses that she had and the connection that she had that was much deeper than a human kind of connection.
Right. Yeah, and I think those are beautiful connections that we can make with animals. And I feel like, I don't know, I'd be curious if the majority of people don't get to experience that, or for whatever reason. It could be, whatever reason, but that's really beautiful. And like the word that came to mind was like impulses, like potentially they pick up on like your impulses, or they get used to your impulses and stuff. So no, that's super beautiful. Loose.
Which one is loose? Oh, that one's pretty good.
Nice.
19.
19.
Yeah, you have to have a steady hand.
Yeah. What do you wish someone taught you a long time ago?
To forgive, but never forget. So that forgiveness is hard on one sense, but also being aware that remembering is also an important part of the learning that happens in when you're, have to forgive someone, and the understanding that comes from it is that you don't forget, but that you learn and, I don't know, learn from it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I get a sense of, especially in like, a healing journey, are you truly healing if you are kind of forgetting? I think, it's important to remember, and not forget. But forgiveness is a huge part of healing and growth, so that's really beautiful. This has been the Windy City's Finest, On Location with Mac and Perry. I'm Perry, he's Mac, and this is...
I'm Jen.
Awesome, we'll be right back.
Welcome to the Windy City's Finest, On Location with Mac and Perry. I'm Mac, he's Perry, and this is...
I'm Jen.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with me, Jen. So you are a cowboy poet, and we're going to learn all about cowboy poetry in my session here. I'm very excited to talk with you about it. Maybe to start, just tell me just a little about yourself.
Well, I guess life goes a little bit in chapters. Grew up on a farm, married an amateur roper, and of course was a farm wife then, and taught school after the kids left home, basically, and retired from from being a teacher to being a granny nanny. Started a band and entertained at all the senior homes, and then started Medicine Hat Cowboy Poetry early in 2019.
2019. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, you've done a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about the cowboy poetry side of things. So you're the president of the Cowboy Poetry, Medicine Hat Cowboy Poetry Foundation. What does that involve with you running the foundation, being the president?
Well, to start with, it was finding people that were going to have a like interest, that wanted to as well. And fortunately, some really enthusiastic people came into my presence, which was a real godsend. Then, of course, starting from scratch, you don't have any money, so we each put in $100, so that was our beginning budget. Then we had a website, so another role for me was to be putting something on it, which was something I hadn't really thought about. I only thought when I started this that we'd have an event once a year. But, and then not only stuff on the newsletter, but not on the website, but then a newsletter as well, so that's a regular thing. And then COVID came along, not too long after, and we couldn't go to sing at the senior homes, so you felt for their isolation and felt for the change that it was for them, and thought, well, telephoning them would be, there's nothing contagious about telephoning. And then you discover that, my goodness, they have stories. And I was telling the president, the vice president at the time, who was the MC at the event, and she says, well, yeah, we have to get those down. We have to, and we're cowboy poetry, you have to do in poetry. So I was thinking, who would do this, She said, you will. I said, I will, and I did. And it's almost addictive. I mean, it's kind of a neat way a different way of telling a story. And anyway, I had to find sponsors. There was grant applications to learn how to do. There's budgeting that you learn how to do. And I've also been helping folks do memoirs. In fact, one of the ladies, we published her memoir. And right now I'm working with a lady helping her organize her memoir and encouraging her to write it. When we started, she was 95. Now she's 96. And she's not in any hurry to get it all done.
Okay.
But anyway, those are kind of the roles that I've had over the course of time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a lot going on there. It keeps you busy, I'm sure.
My favorite thing is having performers be on stage or reading a poem to a senior, for instance, that you've put their story into a poem, is seeing them just light up and almost sit up straighter. And there's just something that can't even compare to making someone feel that they count and that they're important and that their story, someone was interested enough not only to hear it, but to spell it back to them in poetry. Yeah. It
sounds like it's not necessarily about the poet themselves, but about that audience member and that reaction. So yeah, that's really lovely. Yeah, I do want to maybe get into like specifics about cowboy poetry, because people may not know what that is, and you're the person to talk to. Absolutely. So I would just start with a very simple question of what is cowboy poetry?
Well, it depends who you're talking to. Everybody has a different interpretation of it. And as I was trying to figure out myself, what is it, I decided that we would just have our own definition. And generally speaking, I think it is measured rhythm and rhyme. Elko, which is the biggest gathering in the States, they allow free verse, but to me that doesn't quite fit my definition of it. And I think it's people writing their own stuff about their own escapades, their own experiences, their own feelings about things. And even if they choose someone else's piece, to perform, it's they can really identify with it. It's something they're as passionate about as the person that wrote it. So often you don't even bother you're writing your own because someone else has done it so well. It's nice to be able to just, you know, use theirs and of course give them credit for it. There's always that, you know, giving the credit. I would say that it always has, I think, an important part of cowboy poetry is the preamble. The preamble is the part that where you before you do your, you know, performing it, it's like why you chose the piece, or you know, your connection to it, or your experience, you know, why you wrote it, like what happened to make you want to write it. I think that's always important. The other thing about cowboy poetry is the lingo. There's always, they have really I don't know what kind of comparisons you call them, but ones that not usual comparisons. The language I find generally is relatively simple. It's just like ordinary conversational, but then it's in verse. And as some poets are doing this, they're giving their preamble, and before you know it, they're partway into their poem before you realize that, oh, there's the rhyme going on. And I find that it's a skillful thing to do, and certainly some of them do that so well that I think it's delightful. They quite surprise their audience by all of a sudden, oh, they're into the poem already. But, you know, anyway, yeah. And I think it's unusual and literal ways of explaining things, not your usual way of saying it, that I think is kind of neat. Actually, one of the things is the lingo. Like this just happens to be an example of like some of the foods that get said.
Maybe let's bring it to the middle here, Jen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, then we can see it a bit better.
Yeah.
Here's some examples of the lingo. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just about food. Did I change this?
No, you're good.
So, you know, like who would think that, you know, they were called these things, and yet they're so literal. I find the lingo delightful. Actually, it's part of the flavor of it, I think you would say, of cowboy poetry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Now I can't see them, but what's an example here?
Well, let's say onions, skunk eggs. Well, like, you know, it's, yeah, and splatter dabs for pancakes.
Okay.
Splatter dabs. Cow salve for butter. Like,
Sure.
weird, but somehow descriptive in a strange kind of way, an interesting kind of way, and literal, like quite, I don't know. That's the part that I really like about cowboy poetry.
Nice. Yeah.
It's something you've experienced, something you're close to, something you're very passionate about, and something that can connect to your audience because you are passionate about it. So, you know, I have seen cowboy poets do something about, I remember the one fellow talking about an orange. And by the time he was through with it, we all laughed. And it was cowboy poetry. Or the gal who talks about the washer and all of the things that the rancher puts in the washer. I mean, is that about land or cows or horses? No. But it's so that's why I think the topics can really vary. It's more on the person's connection to it and their enthusiasm about the topic. Because who can get excited about an orange? But by the time we were all through with it,
Right.
yeah, about cutting it, and it was absolutely, he just was a classic when he did that. And anyway.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. And I guess sure, it maybe doesn't have to specifically be about ranching specifically or farming specifically, but I guess what comes to mind is even like just certain values around that. I think about, you know, the one fellow who did the one poem and it was about his drug problem, but it was being drug around by his ear, and it was really about family values and being raised a certain way, and so that's kind of what I was thinking of as well. About
Yeah.
cowboy poetry is often around those
It
kind
is.
of values. Would you say?
Wholesome, very wholesome values, yeah. And where a handshake is, you don't need any contracts. A handshake, and and so when we moved to the city, that just wasn't the case. Like it was just strange to us, like really, because you grew up with that and couldn't believe that when you talk to the fellow and you're going to the fence between your property and his, that, yeah, sure, he'll share the cost of it. But then he decides to move and he says, well, why would I pay for it? I'm moving. Like, that's just not a country value. And I think another important part about cowboy poetry is always remember where it started, its history. I think remembering that helps. It's almost like a foundation, a grounding that cowboy poetry needs in order to be cowboy poetry. And that history to me is amazing. It started right after the Civil War. There were a lot of cattle, Texas Longhorns, of course. Millions of them, because after when the Civil War was going on, they just became wild and free. So these cattle needed to be trailed from Texas to, at first it was to Kansas. And these herds would be 1,000 to 3,000 cattle. So like, just picture these cowboys. What do? They would make up poetry. And then around the campfire, they would tell the poetry. So that, to me, is the basis of cowboy poetry. If we remember that, then it helps us, to form a foundation upon which cowboy poetry is built. And it's about stories. And cowboy poets like Glenn Mackenzie was a Medicine Hat poet. He's passed on, of course, years ago. But I remember hearing him. If we were at a branding, we'd hear him. If we were at a banquet, he'd have his poem. And it was so nice because he didn't have to get a paper out. He just had them all in his head. And it was so entertaining. And I can just imagine this is what these cowboy poets were like. You don't want it to be a dying art. And it will be if someone doesn't do something. So here's me, foolish. Like, why do I start something that everyone else is quitting? No, but it's tough. It's tough to establish something and to make it go. But there's a lot of people with a lot of skill that you're wanting to reach, and you're wanting also ordinary folk, city folk especially, to appreciate country, a genre that's purely country, I think, rural.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're doing, trying to kind of preserve that history and that culture. Yeah, it can be a lot of work, especially if there are other places who aren't doing it anymore. And so that seems like quite a challenge.
That's why we have open mic on the Friday night, so that people that just give it a try, a small audience,
We appreciate you making the time to chat with us. Yeah, I think we've got time for maybe one more question. And this is going to it's the last question that we usually ask. It's a deep question, but how would you say that cowboy poetry or being involved with the foundation, like how has that changed you as a person? Can you think you could answer that?
It changed me to being more public than probably I'm used to, or that I would choose to be, but need to be. And it's a good thing. I've met so many wonderful people, and so many connections that have really been beautiful connections, people I really appreciate knowing. Writing skills. I never ever considered myself a writer, and yet I enjoy that. Of course, doing the poetry, just the research, discovering things, exploring and discovering is so fun. It's like a treasure hunt. Like when you find, just as a for instance, I was thinking about the very first rodeo. Of course, Medicine Hat had an early rodeo, but they always say Raymond was first, and of course Calgary was 1912. That was after that. So I'm thinking, inputting first rodeo, so discovering things on the computer, and he had always said that, you know, there was this one place in the States that had, you know, very first rodeo. Yeah, like, and then I found the names of the 3 cowboys that were at the first rodeo, where it was, the names of the ranches they came from. Well, I just felt like I had been to second heaven. Sounds really weird, but it's like finding a nugget, a gold nugget, and then putting it to poetry. It was just like, oh, it just was the best thing in the world. Like, weird, I know.
So you were able to make some poems out of
I
that?
do, I do. I have that one in a poem, just because, like, I didn't know all that stuff. But it's interesting, the song that I sang about the bull. Yeah, a bull rider came up to me. He says, "Yeah, I knew all about. I heard all about Crooked Horn. Yep, but where did you find that all that information?" And I think that's the neat part, is that it kind of adds to what they already know about something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I'm glad that you're able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually that's a good segue to like the next segment, which will be the showcase. We're actually we're gonna hear some cowboy poetry. So yeah, I think that's all the time we have for this segment. This has been the Windy City's Finest on Location with Mac and Perry. I'm Mac, he's Perry, and this is...
I'm Jen.
We'll be right back.
Welcome once again to the Windy City's Finest on Location with Mac and Perry. My name is Perry, he's Mac, and this is...
I'm Jen.
Yes, and I'm super excited to jump into our showcase. Getting to listen to you talk about cowboy poetry got me really inspired, and so I am super excited to dive in. I love poetry, and so I'm very interested in the genre of cowboy poetry. And my understanding is that the foundation that you're a part of, you've actually been able to publish certain books here,
Yes.
which are a collection of poems, as I understand. And I think the first one that I wanted to dive into really quick was this one here, and it's Country Stories. And I might flip through the index here, but what could you tell me about this one specifically?
Well, Country Stories was, it was actually still during COVID, and I was interviewing seniors because we couldn't sing at the homes with our band. And so another way of connecting with seniors was talking to them, finding their story, and writing a poem about their story, and videoing them. So on our website, we have videos of many of these. But in addition to that, we decided to put it into a book. So there would be a picture of the person I talked to, and then I'd be writing a bio about them. Their biography would always include things that that are interesting, and maybe how they played, or songs that they sang, or activities that they did, or the responsibilities that they had. So I always tried to include a little bit of history in their bio, so that it becomes not just the story of them, but a story about times and what times were like. And then, of course, the poem about their story. The interesting thing about this, because it was all done by telephone, is that you would, of course, consult with them and make sure you got all the details right. So you did lots of checking with them, lots of telephone calls, the interview first, the checking whether you got the information right for their bio. You'd write the poem, and maybe you didn't have, some of the details quite right, but you'd talk to them and, share their poem. And then when we put it into a book, like we videoed some of them, but when they were in a book, then we would get a print sponsor, someone who sponsored the printing of the book, and then that would be a fundraiser for us, selling the book.
Amazing, right? And I just want to clarify: this is Country Stories, or are we on Stories from Seniors?
They're almost the same.
Oh, okay, very interesting.
But
okay.
interesting how that came about.
Yeah.
Kind of Stories from Seniors is what we started with.
Right.
So then it was a new year, and we decided we had already, gone into this, and we were talking to more seniors, and COVID was still COVID was still in progress, let's say. So I was actually talking to a fellow and a gal, and she was, she was probably early 80s. It seems funny to me now, but she was early 80s. And her only problem was that she did not want to be called a senior. So I said, well, she didn't want to be in a book that's called Stories from Seniors.
Right.
So I said, do you have another suggestion? She says, well, why don't you just call it Country Stories? She wasn't a senior, and she wasn't about to be called one.
Right.
Yeah, she's over 80. So that's how Country Stories came to be. It's simply a continuation of Stories from Seniors.
I see.
So it's really not much different.
No, that's totally fair. And I appreciate that, being mindful of, how people want to be addressed. That's totally fair. And I also, I recall you talking about something with, in your segment with Mac, of stories of like times, and kind of trying to capture that in some way, shape, or form. That isn't just like a photo, in more of a unique way, potentially. And so I really appreciated that.
What a beautiful thing for them to have at their stage in life. And the best part of it is how many of these people that we've interviewed have passed on. And so their stories are permanent now, are otherwise they would be lost with them. So
I just love what you're saying about, seeing people. The word that came to mind is shine. You know what I mean? Those little moments. And it's not like, being on stage necessarily. Sure, there's like your camera and it's being recorded, but it's like those little moments of people like shining and just being alive. You know what I mean? I love that. So,
and that their story is important.
Yes.
Not only was it important enough for us to, to write it down and to write a poem about it, but now to be like on TV, like, you know what I mean, on camera. And it's an opportunity that some of them never ever had a chance otherwise.
No, I think that's really beautiful. And I think that's, one of the greatest things that is potentially coming from technology, you know what I mean? And like, so I really appreciate that. And it sounds like we're going to come back to some of that stuff when we get to the last one here, but I just want to jump quickly to our next one, which was, this one, Pause and Poems. So this was another book published, and I was just really curious what you could tell me about what's in that one.
Well, that was an interesting one. We never knew. Everything seemed to evolve very organically. We didn't really have a plan. And we were kind of at the end of our, we didn't know if we were at the end of Country Stories, but we had done quite a number of them. And we were actually doing an interview at the Red Cliff Legion, who were very generous to us in using their facility. And these dogs came in on the side. They didn't interrupt us. We had rented the room, but they, and then these dogs walked out again. And that was the morning. In the afternoon, these dogs came in, and lo and behold, one, and I thought, because we did all of these interviews back to back, because of course we've rented the room, and we're taking advantage of the space, and we had everybody back to back, and the one didn't show. And I thought, really? Everybody, everything set up, like this is not good. And lo and behold, these dogs are walking out again, like just along the side, like one behind the other, leading their dog. Well, we got nothing else to do except go over and see what they're all about. That was the beginning of Pause and Poems.
Amazing.
Because they were, Jamie Billings, he was working with Meliora Dogs then. He's doing a wonderful project about, dogs. And he trains and he finds dogs. He supports these people that need service dogs, people with PTSD, people with diabetes, all of these, that really couldn't survive without having a service dog. And he is the hub. Anybody that wants to brings their dog, and he helps train the dog. And like, it was just amazing. So what we did then, Paws and Poems ended up talking to various people who had service dogs. We realized that to make a book, we kind of didn't have enough material. So I started researching things like the coyote. And if you look at the table of contents, there's one about mice, there's one about the bobcat.
No, I love that sense of exploration that it sounds like you get out of this. But we would be remiss if we didn't get to some cowboy poetry. So I'm going to move us swiftly along to our third book over here, but I understand that was probably the first one, The Stories with Seniors.
But we were all done. We kind of combined the two together.
Yeah, and so hopefully if you feel comfortable sharing the piece of poetry from this one.
Well, it isn't from this one. Oh, yes, it is from this one.
Yeah.
It is. Yes, it is. Herb Krause. He is a fellow, he lived out by Hilda, and this is kind of the preamble that cowboy poets do. Where did it come from? Well, these were his neighbors. And as he's growing up, he hears this story, and he's always remembered the story. It's called Neighbors and True Friends. A threesome were neighbors, close friends through the years, but sometimes things got kind of tense. 'Cause farming's for profit and poker's for keeps, but their friendship, it always showed good common sense. Now, most every Sunday, they'd have them a game, while the others would head off for church to show off their new clothes and wear their best manners and the news of the week there to search. Mac, he was a bachelor. No wife there to nag him and tell him that gambling's a sin. Mac wasn't good at the ranch side of life, but at poker, he often would win. He didn't keep cattle. They need feed all winter, and summers you'd waste making hay. Horses? Good keepers that fend for themselves. With his wood leg, near home he would stay. Now Dave and his wife, they lived a few miles due east. On afternoon Sundays, he'd help out poor Mac. Came with horse and a buggy and money to gamble. Well, he lost all three in a game of blackjack. There was always a visit as part of the deal. Then the rest of them noticed that Dave is gone. They just caught him hitching the team to sneak off, the team that Mac had rightfully won. Mac got so mad, "That's my stuff you're stealing." Then he dunked Dave's head in manure. He kicked Dave's rear end with his stiff wooden leg. Dave had to walk home, that's for sure. It was only days later that Mac gave it back. It was Dave's only cart and best mare. "I was planning to give it back right away. Didn't want your wife knowing about your gambling affair." Now, Hargrave had pasture right up to old Mac's, was the wealthiest rancher around. And Mac, with his bum leg, got hungry for beef. So the odd time, stray dogies he found. It was early in summer when Hargrave dropped by. Did his friend need some groceries from town? Of course they would have them a good game of cards. The loss Hargrave suffered was hard to live down. To help him feel better, Mac offered him lunch. "I'll fry you the best steak around." Mac hobbled to the barn where the carcass was hung. The green part he cut off and threw to the hounds. Hargrave praised Mac. "This is such good steak. Of the steaks that I've had, this one's the best." When Mac said that it was his own meat he ate, you could say that his neighbor friend wasn't impressed. The groceries Mac ordered were brought the next day. The bill, I don't know, must have got lost. Two neighbors would always look out for old Mac, though there were times friendship boundaries were crossed.
I know in poetry they do this. No, thank you so much for sharing that. I love that the character's name is Mac.
Yeah, right, there's Mac behind the camera.
But yeah, no, that's super interesting. And one thing I wanted to point out, like more specifically about the poetry, and I think you mentioned this with your conversation with Mac, but it's that kind of structure. I was hearing of like the A-B kind of rhyme scheme. Is that like your go-to? Is that what most of you follow, or do you like to choose a rhyming scheme, or is it just whatever
no.
comes out?
You start with a line that's the hardest part, is finding the first line. And then the rhythm of the story just seems to gallop along.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're halfway through and you got a really good rhythm going down here.
Right.
And then you go back and you you make this match this down here.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's AA, BBA. Sometimes AB, AB. Sometimes AA, BB. I don't know. Sometimes long lines, sometimes short, but conversational is the big thing.
Right.
And I think the big thing to remember about cowboy poetry that I think I forgot to mention earlier is that there's that little hook at the end. There's often that little, the ending that is unexpected maybe, or it just catches you by surprise. I think that's the one thing that I like about cowboy poetry.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome, and I think we got to hear some of those things in this piece here. And I think that is unfortunately all the time we have for this segment, but I'm super glad that we got to talk about each of these and actually hear a piece. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this has been the Windy City's Finest on Location with Mac and Perry. I'm Perry, he's Mac, not Mac from the poem. And this has been...
I'm Jen.
Awesome.
It's Mac and Perry in the place. Da-na-na-na. Mac and Perry.
Go live to create.
Da-na-na-na. Mac and Perry invite you to stay.